Presiding Officer, in this week of all weeks, we know that governments in these islands can and do work together. Tavish Scott referred to the First Minister's reference to her participating in COBRA, and indeed, when I was a minister, I did on it, certainly on one occasion, and I think more than one occasion. I still have the UK Transport Minister's mobile number in my mobile telephone. That's from when I was Transport Minister. So in practice, co-working is perfectly possible, and perhaps it's a little bit more common than is sometimes imagined. Sometimes the ministers are quite happy to bypass the civil servants to make things move just that little bit faster than others might want. Now, for our part, some co-decision-making is already embedded in law. The former British Waterways Board was a cross-border authority which required both Scottish and UK ministers to sign off decisions that were required to be obeyed by ministers. Thus, I found myself, when I was responsible for canals, signing off a decision that related entirely to a transaction in Birmingham. The deal was I would do what the UK Minister wanted to do in England, and he would sign off anything we wanted in Scotland. But that co-decision-making crucially enabled us to protect canals in the public sector in Scotland when, south of the border, they wanted to travel in a fundamentally different way. So that shows it can be done. Similarly, appointments to the United Kingdom Climate Change Committee are jointly made by the Northern Irish, Welsh, Scottish and UK ministers and require unanimity on appointments. And on one occasion where there was a serious discussion on the matter, I found that I conducted the interviews with the candidates for a vacancy on that board, and thereafter we were able to achieve the unanimity that hadn't been there initially. So there already are some legislated areas, tiny, but the point is they show that the principle of accepting that legislating co-decision-making is already something that we have. Practical experience shows it can be done. On finance, it would be particularly dangerous, I think, to imagine that there's no scope for legally embedding co-decision-making, but equally, as others have said, there needs to be respect between individuals of different political parties, parliaments and governments, and carrying different objectives. Now, Baroness Goldie is correct in saying that one can't legislate for everything, but there are some things we could do differently on a unilateral basis that would deliver shared benefit. There's been some reference to this already. The government that most promptly publishes details of intergovernmental meetings and the subjects discussed will create the opportunity for both parliaments who are interested in the subject to engage in their proper process of oversight. The laggard loses, and that's a message to governments both here in Edinburgh and in London. Neither government is perhaps as rapid as it could be in publishing that kind of information. And indeed, Belfast and Cardiff as well. Now, I note in the report that Professor McHarg said parliamentary scrutiny has been one of the areas in which the current system simply doesn't work. And I think that's got to be correct. A shared acceptance of the need to legislate over intergovernmental relations, I think, is vital. We can't simply leave it to memorandum of understanding. There are old arguments that flexibility delivers benefit, and yes, it does, but probably to governments substantially less so, I suggest, to Parliament. Professor McEwen floats the idea of an additional Parliament committee on intergovernmental relations, and others have made other suggestions for new parliamentary committees here. But on the other hand, the Standards, Procedures and Public Appointments Committee's inquiry into our committee structures has almost universally attracted comments saying that we have too many committees and that too many members are on too many committees. Some are actually on 3 committees. And who knows, the Standards and Procedures and Public Appointments Committee may bring forward the suggestion that members should only be a member of a single permanent committee. Note there's a little weasel word in there, so there might be a way out. Now, on negotiations between governments, I think the Scot work process, which is the standard that's used in most commercial negotiations, which is called limit, like, intend, must, it, in other words, you go in with 3 lists, it's perfectly possible to publish in advance the must. In other words, I go into the negotiations, here's what I need to get from my side. The like and intend, which are the dice that are played as the negotiation plays out, I suspect you can't publish. But I think there is more scope to publish the must intentions of various governments. Now, I'm one of those former ministers, and there's nothing more ex than an ex-minister, I have to say. But I think I didn't realise how much ministers had power until I became a minister, and I suspect I share that with others. But there are opportunities for Parliament to take more interest. There's a couple of things coming, Presiding Officer, in my concluding remarks here. Supermajorities are coming to us, and we're going to have to look at that. We've got the opportunity in this debate and beyond to think about doing things differently. Perhaps, just perhaps, ex-ministers, at least on this benches, untrammelled by the prospect of offending anyone and not being appointed to the House of Lords, perhaps we on this benches can be quite radical, where others might be more cautious. Presiding Officer.